Okay, well, I think we are all set to get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are starting the Local Governments and Clean Energy webinar. We are co-hosted today by Renew Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum, and the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. And I'm also very excited that we have wonderful speakers for you here today. Today's topic is focused on how local governments from across Wisconsin are making progress on transitioning to renewable energy, reducing operating expenditures on utility bills, and helping to address residents' desires to reduce emissions. So you'll hear from local elected officials, staff, and a utility perspective about the process to utilize and implement clean energy goals under challenging fiscal circumstances. We're looking forward to a great webinar today, and we're really happy to have you join us today. If you want to dig in more to these issues and have access to more clean energy information, I'd encourage you to visit our website at renewwisconsin.org and take a look at our January Renewable Energy Summit, which will take place January 12th, 13th, and 14th. And today we opened early bird registration, so it's the perfect time to check it out. As I may have said earlier, I'm Heather Allen, the Executive Director of Renew Wisconsin, and I'll be your host for today's event. And we're honored to have Curt Witynski from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities and Scott Coonan from the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum co-hosting today with us. The order of events today is that we will start off with Mayor Eric Genrich from Green Bay, who will welcome us and give us an update on the progress the city of Green Bay is making towards sustainability and shifting to clean energy. And then we will hear from Craig Harms of Dairyland Power, who will talk about the utilities' work to shift to renewable energy and to help local communities and member organizations do the same. He will be introduced by Scott Coonan of the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum. Then we will hear from Mayor Rebecca Glewen of the city of Beaver Dam about their successful efforts to shift to solar energy and to reduce energy expenditures through energy efficiency and other upgrades. Mayor Glewen will be introduced by Curt Witynski of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. And our final speaker will be Ned Noel. He's a senior planner for the city of Eau Claire, and he will highlight Eau Claire's strategy to shift to renewable energy. And we will finish with questions and answers. We'll try to leave as much time as possible for questions and answers. We do have the chat and the question and answer features along the bottom of your screen. Please put any questions you have in the question box, the Q&A box, and we will try to get to them after the presentations. We have a really robust panel and agenda today, so make sure you get your questions in early so other people can vote them up, and we will know that that's what people want to talk about. All right, and I just want to check to see if we have all the speakers available right now before we take the next step. Can I ask my moderators from Renew, do we have Mayor Genrich? Yes, we do. Great. There he is. Perfect timing. It is now my honor to introduce Mayor Eric Genrich. He was elected the 42nd mayor of Green Bay in April 2019. Prior to becoming mayor, he was elected to the State Assembly in November 2012. Serving 3 terms, he represented the 90th Assembly District, which comprises the majority of the city of Green Bay. He was born and raised in Green Bay, received his BA from the UW-Madison, and attained a graduate degree from UW-Milwaukee. Prior to his election to the State Assembly, Eric worked in the state and federal governments and later as an IT librarian for Brown County Library. He's been actively supportive of several community organizations, including Neighborhood Works Green Bay, on whose board he served for 6 years. And I'm very excited to hear about the progress that Green Bay has been making towards sustainability and clean energy. So without further ado, Mayor Genrich, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Heather. And I apologize for my late arrival. I was attending as a webinar attendee, I think, and so somebody had to switch me to a panelist. So thanks to whoever took care of that for me. And again, apologies for the delayed arrival. But really an honor for me to participate in this program. So thanks to Renew and to all of the sponsors and participants for making today possible. Originally, somebody had reached out and said, Mayor, would you be interested in being one of our panelists? And I said, we're really not ready. We're kind of at the starting line. We've done a lot of good things, and I'm really excited about the progress that we've made thus far. But we're really still in the position of learning from a lot of other community leaders and renewable energy experts around the state and country. So really glad to be here to kind of kick things off and then step back and participate as an active learner in this mission of generating renewable energy and fighting climate change and creating sustainable and resilient communities all across the state of Wisconsin. So as I said, we've made some progress recently over the last couple of years. Prior to my arrival, Sustainability Commission was formed here at the City of Green Bay. That is really resident led, citizen led, and they've made some really good strides in recent years. But we did just recently bring on a resiliency coordinator who's going to be with us full time, thanks to our stormwater utility, which is going to be supporting her work, as well as the Fund for Lake Michigan, who is also providing some grant funding to make that full time position possible. And this, I think, is really where a lot of progress will take place, is this partnership between the full-time employee, our resiliency coordinator, Melissa Schmitz, and the citizen-led Sustainability Commission, obviously working with our Common Council and my office to realize a lot of the aspirations that we have, as I said, to build a sustainable and resilient city of Green Bay. So as you all know, solar energy is a real viable alternative to traditional sources of energy and fossil fuels. It's becoming, I think, more and more viable every single day. States and countries across the world that are similarly situated to Wisconsin have proved that it's a real viable source of energy. I had the privilege of visiting Germany almost 3 years ago, I guess now, to learn from their clean energy transition. Very similar climate, and obviously generating far more energy from solar, but then also wind in Germany. So just to reinforce that point, something becoming more and more viable and especially cost competitive with each passing day. So I think that's an important thing to emphasize. We have been able to make some small scale investments in solar energy here in the city, thanks to some excess stadium tax. It's a very unique thing, specific to Green Bay. We had a portion of a sales tax devoted to Lambeau Field upgrades. There was some excess money associated with those upgrades, and because of legislative action, which took place when I was in the legislature, led by Representative Dave Steffen, the excess was sent back to local units of government here in Brown County. So one of the projects that our Common Council identified was renewable energy projects. So we've been able to take roughly $60,000 of that excess and make some upgrades to solar panels at one of our downtown parks, Liked Park. So that was something that we were able to finalize just this past summer. And we have also identified a fire station or two that could take some panels. So looking forward to making those upgrades. Our Sustainability Commission member, Professor John Arndt, has worked with students at the university to benchmark several of our buildings here within the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, to identify the different usages that we see across the organization at our different facilities. They're also benchmarking the city's carbon footprint, which is obviously really important when you're setting these goals of 100% renewable energy, for example, by 2050. So looking forward to seeing some of those numbers finalized. We also are really serious about creating some EV charging stations at our different facilities. It's an unmet need for the public. I think generally, people are looking for more of these charging stations, and it could also be something that would benefit us internally here with our fleet, because we're trying to transition to at least hybrid vehicles, but to have electric vehicles, I think, would be a huge benefit to us here in the city. we're also really serious about making some green infrastructure upgrades that, aren't directly related necessarily to renewable energy generation, but when you're talking about climate change generally, I think that's a really important goal, especially for us here in City of Green Bay, where we've seen a lot of water quantity type issues and water quality, which has always been a concern and continues to be a huge issue with the growing dead zone in the Bay of Green Bay. So a lot of these things obviously connected and will be coordinated by our resiliency coordinator, who is in the process, really the beginning stages of developing that resiliency plan for the City of Green Bay that will encompass, a lot of these green infrastructure initiatives and goals, energy efficiency benchmarks, as well as really getting serious about, clean energy generation, solar power, and potentially wind generation. But the big question, I think, for us, and which I don't think is unique to the City of Green Bay, is how we pay for this stuff. We just went through our 2021 budget process, our operations budget. We're going to be moving into our capital budget phase here pretty quickly. And it's budgets are tight in the state of Wisconsin, I think at the local government level. And we have these lofty aspirations, of being carbon neutral or 100% renewable energy by 2050. But we've really got to get serious about taking immediate action so that these aren't just pie in the sky aspirations, that they're realizable. Because I think I obviously don't want to exaggerate what's in front of us, but I fundamentally believe this is it's an existential question and crisis that we're facing with climate change. And we need to all be serious about addressing it. So the rubber really meets the road at the local level, and we need to figure out, as I said, how to pay for this stuff. WPS, which is our utility, made a big announcement, I think back at the end of July, early August, in terms of their goals for carbon-free energy by 2050, which really align, obviously, with what we're trying to do here. So I think it's going to be really important for us to work closely with our utility. There've been some experiences in the state where utilities and local governments are working at cross purposes, and that's obviously not beneficial to what our shared goals are. So we want to make sure that we're well aligned with WPS, helping one another meet those goals that we've both articulated. The other thing that's a little bit amorphous to me, but's been discussed recently, is using municipal utilities to finance some of these renewable energy upgrades. So here in the City of Green Bay, as I said, we've got WPS as our utility. So as far as an energy utility, it's not municipally owned here. We of course do have a water utility. And so, renewable energy isn't necessarily core to the mission of a water utility. But, we are learning, based on conversations that I've had with legislative counsel in Madison and with some legislators, and opinions from the PSC, it might be possible for our water utility to assist us in financing some of these projects. So as I said, with budgets being as tough as they are, it's essential that we explore any and all options with regard to financing, partnering with these municipal utilities, potentially, obviously working with our energy utilities in WPS. So that's the big question that's in front of us. I think we all know what needs to be done to meet the challenge of climate change, to meet these goals that we all have. It's just a matter of really pulling together, getting serious, and taking action on these things that we know are necessary. So again, really excited to have been offered the opportunity to just kind of kick things off and offer our perspective from the City of Green Bay, and looking forward to learning much more from the participants.
Thank you so much, Mayor. It's an honor to have you here. And I will now turn this over to Scott Coonan of the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum to tell us a little bit about his organization and to introduce the next speaker.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to follow up, Mayor, here from my hometown of Green Bay, and go Pack Go. So I'm the executive director of Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum, and we are approaching kind of this topic of conversation: renewable energy, new energy technologies, from a conservative, market-oriented direction. Recognize changes in the marketplace, recognize, solar, wind, anaerobic digesters, renewable natural gas, geothermal, battery storage, even electric vehicles. The technologies that, we think are going to play a larger share in the market in the next 5-10 years, work in concert with each other, but recognize that we kind of have to treat them as disruptive technologies. And any disruptive technology that we've ever had, in this country, there are huge opportunities, but the challenges are very real as well. And recognize that the challenges, particularly for local governments, are very serious, whether it's policy, implementation, financing, any of those things. And I really appreciate the opportunity to join with Renew and the League here just to kick off the conversation, right? To start talking about it and see if we can find some of those solutions. So I have the distinct honor of introducing Craig Harms from Dairyland Power Cooperative. Craig has been with Dairyland since 1996. He's got over 30 years of experience working for electric cooperatives. And obviously, as the manager of business development, he's working with distributed generation, business development efforts, assisting, the 24 member cooperatives that they have in the state, all across large swaths of Western Wisconsin. With renewable energy and economic development programs. So I think, Craig is really well situated to talk about, I think, especially that collaboration piece. How can locals work with cooperatives, utilities, and all the different layers here. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Craig, and I appreciate you being here with us, Craig, and I think the floor is yours.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for having me as part of the panel today. Dairyland Power is a generation and transmission cooperative, a G&T. We're a wholesale power supplier, and we provide power to 24 electric cooperatives, distribution electric cooperatives, the retail service providers, in parts of 4 states, and 18 of those electric cooperatives are in Western Wisconsin. I want to point out on our map there in Southern Wisconsin, the Badger State Solar Project, 149 megawatts. This is Dairyland Power's first utility scale solar project. And this project we hope to get construction started in July of next year, and then have that project operational by November 2022, 2 years from now. And I want to speak specifically about distributed generation, because I know that's what a lot of our communities are focused on. It's hard to believe that 2 to 3 years ago, Dairyland Power had the largest rollout in Wisconsin history. It was the largest rollout as of that time, 25 megawatts of distributed solar, 500 kW on up to 2.5 megawatts per project, 18 projects around our system, 14 in Wisconsin. And I want to point out that we don't actually own those projects, but we have power purchase agreements, and those facilities are owned, operated, and maintained by third parties out there. And those projects were located next to substations or adjacent to infrastructure that was capable of handling those facilities without costly upgrades. And that's an advantage of having distributed solar. But our primary reason for engaging in these projects was because co-op members prefer local renewable energy projects. Our projects have pollinator vegetation. Of course, that's fantastic habitat for bees, butterflies, and birds. But it also reduces water erosion and holds down maintenance costs. And it builds public support, and that's important when you're going through the permitting process. And then lastly, I want to point out that Dairyland and our team here, we continue to look at the opportunity for battery storage with those distributed solar projects as the efficiencies and economics of battery technologies continue to improve. When I talk about distributed solar projects, these could be projects, as I just mentioned, that Dairyland has and manages that provide renewable power to all of our cooperatives. And in this case, we got the 14 I mentioned, plus one other project, 15 total projects in Wisconsin. Or it could be projects that our member cooperatives have. They may own them or again have power purchase agreements. And so we've got member co-ops out there with solar projects that they've got in place that benefit all of their members and increase the amount of renewable energy on their system. And then we also have co-ops, and some of them are those same co-ops that have community solar projects, or what might also be known as solar gardens. And those would be projects, of course, that would benefit certain members who have subscribed to those projects. But altogether out there, in terms of distributed solar, we have 36 projects either in place or under construction or pending, total of 33 megawatts. Now you might ask, well, what kind of process did you go through there at Dairyland when you did your projects? So what would you recommend in terms of a process to our community or to our effort? Well, I would strongly recommend that you start by creating a solar team. And the purpose of this team would be to plan your project and to prepare a request for proposals for that project. You're going to establish your goals and the selection criteria. You're going to issue the RFP, and then you're going to evaluate the RFP, or I should say the proposals, as you receive those proposals, and then of course select your winner or winners for the project or projects. And there's a number of key criteria that I've mentioned here that you're going to want to consider when you evaluate those proposals. And you may want to utilize a third-party consultant, as we have in the past, to make sure that we're giving every developer a fair chance and selecting the absolute best proposal for the project. In terms of key takeaways, I would strongly recommend that if your community is considering a solar project, that you call those communities, contact those communities that have already done projects and learn from their experiences. And then, as I mentioned, we utilize the power purchase agreement approach and therefore don't own any of the projects. And that can be less complicated because then you don't have to deal with site selection, permitting, and working with the utility to ensure you have the right location in terms of infrastructure, equipment procurement, et cetera, et cetera. That's all done by the developer in that case. And when you're looking at the proposals, I would suggest that, you know, all of those things be well spelled out by the developers so that you have confidence that the project can be done on time, on schedule. You're gonna, as I already pointed out, you're gonna want to use a process and select an experienced developer. So use that RFP process and don't be afraid to include in your team, which should include engineering people, finance people, public relations people. You may want to also include members of the public, particularly if you're working on a community solar project. So there's my contact information if you need to call me for any reason. Otherwise, I'm now going to turn it over to Curt Witynski. And he's with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, and he'll introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Craig. Good afternoon, everyone. As Craig said, my name's Curt Witynski, and I'm the Deputy Director of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. The League is, for those of you who aren't familiar with the League, we're an association of all the cities and villages in the state. We have about close to 600 members. Every size community in the state belongs to our association, including the 3 communities we're hearing from during this webinar: Beaver Dam, Green Bay, and Eau Claire. We are pleased to be co-hosting this webinar with Renew Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum. I want to thank Heather for inviting us, initiating this webinar, inviting us to co-host. This is exactly the type of information sharing that the League likes to engage in. Our members have told us that they are interested in learning more about strategies and approaches that local governments can use to reduce their energy costs and meet their clean energy goals. I've been inspired as an active participant in Green Tier Legacy Communities, which is an organization that is under the DNR. It involves about 25 or more cities, villages, and counties that are sharing information about how to be better, how to better engage in sustainability practices. I've been inspired in participating in that organization, as well as listening to our members at large about the different models and approaches communities have been using to try and fund their solar energy engagement, which is exactly what Mayor Genrich was talking about. You know, how do we have these huge goals, these admirable goals of reducing our emissions dramatically by a certain year, but how do we accomplish that among all the other things, all the other services that we need to deliver? So whether it's a small community like Fenimore, or Dane County suburban communities like Fitchburg, Monona, Middleton, or large communities like Madison and Milwaukee. We've watched all of them and tried to help all of them accomplish their clean energy goals. And we intend to continue to help communities accomplish their clean energy goals, kind of clear a path where necessary, where, for instance, third-party financing is maybe blocked by certain interpretations. We'll try and clean that up, and we've engaged in that, advocated for third-party financing for municipalities. So that's a little bit about the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our next speaker, who I've known for at least 5 years since she first started on her path to public service. I'm the Beaver Dam Mayor, Becky Glewen, is our next speaker. She has served as mayor of Beaver Dam since spring of 2017. She just won her second term, a 3-year term, in April of this year. Prior to being mayor, she served on the city council for Beaver Dam for a year, and she was also a county supervisor for 4 years. And I have a sneaking suspicion that being mayor won't be the only public office she holds in the next several years. During her time of public service, she has focused on addressing workforce shortages by initiating efforts to attract new individuals and families to her community. And she has successfully sought and obtained numerous grants and private investment for community revitalization projects, enhanced recreational facilities for the city, and energy conservation projects. And it's that last part I think we're going to hear her talk about a little bit here. So Mayor Glewen, please enlighten us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Curt. It's certainly been a pleasure working with you so far, and I'm hopeful to work with you a lot more in the future. I can't say enough about the League and the value that they bring to especially communities our size, as far as the city of Beaver Dam. We're a community of 17,000 people. And so again, speaking to what you're talking about in budgets and how to make things like energy conservation and sustainability work in those communities, when every nickel right now seems to be, focused on infrastructure, where we're having a lot of complaints from the community, and we want to really try to move those things forward. Excuse me, but also want to thank Renew Wisconsin for putting this together. Heather and your excellent team, it's very well organized and put together, so I want to thank you for that. And also the Conservative Energy Forum. I look forward to talking more with Scott and learning more about that and how the city of Beaver Dam can connect on that as well. So just to give you a little bit of background, I guess we believe, or I believe government determines how it can profitably and effectively achieve energy independence by creating an energy independent community plan. And so initially, right from the beginning of taking office as mayor, we sought out a grant. I have a very extensive background in grant writing and grant directive as far as being a grant director for some large federal projects. So we sought out a planning grant from OEI right away. We received that. We were very fortunate to work with UW Extension, Sherry Gruder on this. And this baseline assessment of energy resource use in government operations, including buildings, infrastructure, and fleet. The baseline then drives our foundation for choosing projects and actions that will move our community toward energy independent community goals, and for measuring progress over time, of course, which we know is very important to justifying why we're putting the time and money into these types of projects. And just that discovery project, we were able to hone in on where we spend, where our costs are in energy. And Beaver Dam, again, of a little over, now we're a little over $17 million budget. 1 million of that is towards energy, a little more than half of that use for electric use. We also realized that our wastewater treatment plant is central to our energy independence. We do have a biogas generator there that we've been fortunate to have. That was a project that was set up before my time, but it generates about $220,000 a year that offsets costs at the water treatment plant. We realized that streetlights are a real opportunity for us for quick payback and changing to LED lighting. And then our community center, which is just recently built, the most recent building as far as newest building, is of course most efficient at the time. So those were just some of the takeaways from big takeaways. I talked to you about the real quick turnaround on doing street lighting, 3.5 years to pay for that $240,000. We didn't move forward on that project because finding $240,000 in a budget is extremely difficult. And so we chose to do a couple of very visible solar projects that I really strongly believe that would be a good kickstart for having this conversation in our community, centered around efficiencies and cost savings. So we really focused again on what grants were available. We've received a focus on energy recip grant. And then we did at that time work with third party financing, the separation of AC and the DC piece with the inverter piece in between was really important. And so it was kind of at the time that we were finishing setting up the financing for this, that was kind of the whole question that was happening at the time of third-party financing, if that was a good step forward. Fortunately, we have a very good relationship with our energy provider, Alliant Energy here, and so we feel that these projects went through because of that to some extent. Then we did, again, write for Wisconsin Office of Energy Innovation grant. We received a 2019 grant and almost $260,000 to replace the boiler, controls for heating and cooling. We replaced windows in this building, and then we also, as a part of the solar project, replaced all the lighting in this building with LED lights. So this, for an older building, has gotten us pretty good efficiency. We had planned on, as a part of that project, moving forward on that community center to put solar there, and excited about the zero net energy possibility there, as well as this being a learning educational piece for our community. Just want to share this because we didn't move forward on this project because sometimes we put plans in place and they don't work out the way we want them to. As we got closer and determining to do this project, we realized that the structure that this building was set up as doesn't have a roof that would sustain the weight of the solar panels with snow. So we had to scratch that project, unfortunately, but because we had the plan in place, we knew that the next best building for getting closer to zero net energy on the building would be our police station, which is the next youngest building. And so we did go ahead and we put our solar array on the police department, offsetting costs there. Back to the wastewater treatment plant, which I find the most exciting. I guess it's the largest municipal energy user. Our utilities director has been very progressive in looking at studies and looking at energy cost savings. Again, we have a biogas generator there. We have a contract with Alliant Energy that is up in 2011. We have very good rates on that, where we sell that energy back to the grid. Unfortunately, with that coming up in 2021, they don't want to pay those rates anymore, of course. And so we are looking at some alternatives. In the meantime, we've looked at how to, again, conserve, and that came out partly out of the studies that Rob had done, as well as our planning. And so you see here a couple of blowers. We were able to, again, receive Focus on Energy grant, almost $40,000. The utilities wrote off the rest of that to pay for that with a real quick turnaround. It actually saves our electricity costs in $4,200 a month. So that payback is in about 6 years. And we've gone from 4 blowers to 2. And feel that that's a real cost savings for us. So we have, again, tried to move forward in determining what we're going to do when the biogas piece, the contract ends. We've had some discussions about setting up energy use so that we don't have to give it back to the grid, that we use it for our own use. We're looking at costs on that. Otherwise, looking to place a solar development on this property at the wastewater treatment plant. It could possibly generate enough to be a net positive there for the treatment plant, which we have green space right here for the wastewater treatment plant. The energy planning grant, again, just put us in line with what are our goals. It gave us some great ideas on how to get there, and we've worked at doing that, again, by kind of targeting each thing on conservation, making simple changes to like replacing windows or air loss areas that we might have, or again, like replacing a boiler system, or the bigger things that we hope to do in the future. So again, just really focusing in our community on energy saving economics and what it means to the taxpayer, and both ways, cost savings in budget times, and in people's household incomes that we don't have a lot of money to keep upping the ante, if I would say, and then also that competitive advantage that we want to be connected to taking care of our resources and being good stewards of our energy and properties and the resources that we have. So we want to talk to that younger generation so that we connect and that we're appealing to the new workforce that's coming through. So that's where we're at right now. I appreciate, again, the invitation. I think just as another value proposition, I'd just like to point out, because of the work that we've done, we have, for again, a community our size, we have attracted a new business called Iconic Energy. They are opening after COVID, but they are hoping to market to not only the Madison, Fond du Lac area, but our Dodge County area. Again, worked closely with Alliant Energy, and Alliant Energy has placed some EV charge stations for us right off of Highway 151 in a good commercial area. So we want to highlight our connection between Madison, Fond du Lac, Oshkosh, Green Bay on the Highway 151 corridor, and that we have that available for people to charge up. And then also our interest has, we've seen a lot of interest out of Alliant Energy in looking at solar fields in this area and continuing to grow that opportunity here close by. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Glewen. So much exciting work, and I'm impressed that you covered so much so quickly. We will have the recording available later on for folks to go back to this video and jot notes down. It's my honor now to introduce Ned Noel. He is a senior planner at the City of Eau Claire. He's been a planner there for 18 years. He's worked in the Twin Cities and the Eau Claire markets. He specializes in sustainability for the City of Eau Claire, working on clean energy and climate change solutions for the community and municipal operations. He graduated from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities with a BA in Geography and Urban Planning. And I will be sharing his slides through my screen, and go ahead and take it away, Ned.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Good to be with you all today. I think I've got about 5 minutes to speed through this, so we want to leave some time for Q&A. As Heather pulls that up, yeah, again, very similar message in terms of what you've already heard today, but I'll try to go through a few of the things that share our experience. Really, when I think about it, at least as a staffer, it begins at the top. What is a value system that a local government has, and our city council has pledged to be in a sustainable community that's focused on equity and good stewardship in light of meeting essential human needs. Next slide. And so to be a sustainable community, what does that actually look like? And one of the things that we wanted to do, instead of just making decisions without the public's backing, is we did a survey in 2017. This was really predicated on the nation pulling out of the Paris Agreement. And our city council was not thrilled with that move. So they wanted to understand what we could do locally, and hence commissioned this public survey that showed about 3/4 of our public felt that we needed to take aggressive stance on carbon emissions and also renewable energy. And next slide. And so this is just a visual to show those goals of the drop down for carbon neutrality, not only for the the city, but also the community. And so, we're trying to get more aggressive over time, banking on technology and price drops as well. Next slide. And I'll just glance over this, but really, this is kind of how we think as staff in terms of, setting those values, those policies, then setting forth plans and the financing that goes with that, and then fulfilling projects and looking at the results of that. And then again, tweaking policy if depending on what might cross-cut that could be different events, staff change, financial challenges, or also pandemics like we have right now. Next slide. So at least in my mind, as I go about project planning, I'm a city planner by trade, and so I'm always looking at leverage. Where can we make the most bang for the buck, so to speak, with not only our limited dollars that we have as a community, but also what's out there in terms of grants and partnerships. And you'll hear about this familiar friend, Office of Energy Innovation, and they have done great things for Beaver Dam and so many communities in the state. And they really are the engine I see for local communities to be able to implement not only plans, but projects. And we benefited greatly from them. So looking at what we can do and kind of capital stack all these different resources and human resources to be able to pull off projects. And I think Green Bay had mentioned too, they created a special fund, but at least at the city, what we did was we carved out a special renewable energy fund that we can leverage in order, in terms of when grants come available, whether at the state or national level, and then working with our partners. Excel Energy They're based out of the Twin Cities, but their Wisconsin division is actually right here in Eau Claire. So we benefit a lot working with their executives on projects. Next slide. So one of the things I would, if you're going to be doing this work, hopefully you've already taken a look at your capital needs in your facilities. But one of the things, again, we were able to take advantage of with OEI funding was a comprehensive facility condition assessment with energy audits. And so looking at that 2050 goal, basically we have 30 years to get to carbon neutrality and 100% renewable energy. How are we going to get there building by building? And so we itemize the cost, we itemize our current funding levels, what's going to be sustainable over the long term, looking at it from really a risk management point of view in terms of our liabilities and our facility condition indexing. So right there, you can't really read it, but there's a chart of 30 years of all of our city buildings and where it ranks in terms of our indexing: green, good, bad, red, bad. And so this really helps us to understand what we need to do financially, also staying within budget restraint limits in terms of our levy and also our debt service. Next slide. And just to highlight two projects, so one that we're very excited about in terms of maximizing leverage is a grant that was through the Department of Energy through this I-94 corridor program. And this is looking at a super fast charger in our downtown area that would be able to charge basically a 200 kW battery in 10 minutes. So quick service downtown, serving as a destination. We were able to get some grants not only from the feds, but also we worked with Xcel Energy in their new EV Make Ready program to completely offset all of the three-phase power charges that will bring the power to the site in our downtown. So this should hopefully be energized and operational by the new year. And this will be 100% renewable electricity through the solar canopy. And that's just a project that shows with how we're implementing our plans. Our climate action plan is called Renewable Energy Action Plan, or REAP for short. And we have sub-plans within that. And this is the electric vehicle roadmap. And this is really trying to understand how we can get 8,000 electric vehicles on the road in 10 years within our city streets and the infrastructure publicly that is going to be needed. And we forecast we're going to need 160 public charging stations. That's outside of what you'd see at home in order for that market uptake. Next slide. And then my last example is our net zero energy building guide, the first in the state, again funded by OEI dollars. And this is really honing in on the building stock. How can we actually electrify all of our buildings over time to meet those goals, which is a tremendous task to transform, thousands of buildings and also get new buildings to go that way. So we've created the guide, 140-page guide for the building sector and developers, and some resources, instructional video. The next slide would show how we're trying to implement this as well through our $18 million library expansion renovation project. And I would suggest, if you're not familiar with it, if you've got projects in the early design and planning process, to tap Focus on Energy's Design Assistance Program. We did this a couple of years ago to look at geothermal, to run this building completely, the heating and cooling on geo. And after the design assistance modeled conventional on fossil fuels versus geo, basically the return on investment was very similar. And so we felt good about that. And now we're in line for a lot of different Focus on Energy rebates after the project is built and verified. So that was my last slide, and I'll just turn it back over to Heather and others for the Q&A period.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ned. We've really got a lot of great material here, and I'm excited for the conversation now. So I'd like to welcome back all of our presenters. Please go ahead and turn on your cameras and turn your mute off so that we can hear you and speak to you. And I believe that Scott is going to kick us off with a first question from the chat.
Yeah, so this is interesting. It came up from a couple of different folks, and maybe more of a question to you, Mayor Glewen, as well as Ned. You know, I'm interested in your conversations with private developers in your areas, right? You know, 40% of Americans live in some version of rental property, whether it's multifamily, apartment, you know, that kind of thing. So how, you know, how have your conversations gone, or have you guys looked at incenting, you know, larger scale private developers, you know, whether it's industrial development or, again, you know, multifamily residential, that kind of thing? How have those conversations gone, pushing them maybe in a renewable direction, or even energy efficiency projects, green building? Ned, you just touched on it a little bit. Interested in how those conversations have gone, and if you guys have toyed with any kind of incentives or programs outside of even just some guidelines.
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, right now with COVID, it's really hurt operational budgets to have more programming dollars. We did make a budget request. City Council was not able to fund that, mainly because of some of the interest that our earnings have been hurt by the COVID. So, you know, you try and you try again, but what we were trying to do there is create some energy efficiency programs that would tap onto focus on energy low income assistance. And so we have ideas and models in place, but we do need that additional funding. And so we're always being creative about maybe other sources for that. But I think when the market conditions improve, we'll be able to have more of hopefully a program available as well. But it's very difficult. I don't know if Gwen has any, or Becky, if you have anything else.
The only thing that I would say is, my work on as a county supervisor really pushed to accept the PACE funding through to incentivize businesses. And so I have talked to, we had a hotel that just went up, and, you know, really tried to push that and connect them with the right people. I haven't figured out really how to get people to take hold of that. But we have, I have a discussion happening right now with a new developer, and they knew about the PACE, funding piece. And so that's a part of the equation and what they look at as far as laying out the financials. So I think that's something more to explore for the future.
I would say too that, you know, builders, if they can, use like a focus on energy program, their home certification program, and they can do that possibly at scale. If you have a larger home builder, they can bring down those costs in mass, you know, hit different price points. And then you actually have a private sector, you know, fulfilling that need instead of looking for government resources.
So Mayor Glewen, just as a follow-up to you, do you really think, so something as new as PACE financing, is it really just a knowledge issue? I mean, is it just, you know, folks really aren't aware? And I know focus on energy from the outside can sometimes be it's a difficult program to get your head around all the different options and grants out there. You know, is it literally just a connection issue to have the resource to know that there is some financing out there?
Well, I definitely think, I mean, it's especially, I think, for that first conversation, and then I don't think a lot of places even know about it, but for myself, trying to grasp all, you know, understanding it and going through it multiple times, and then just really connecting those individuals with, you know, having that conversation with the PACE people. But I was just really surprised that they didn't take advantage of that. So there must be some disconnect that I'm thinking anyway.
Thank you. I'll bring up two more questions, and folks can jump in on if they're ready to speak about either of these. The first one is, have any of the communities looked at equity and jobs, especially investing in local people for some of this renewable energy work, and strategies around that? And then here's a great question for those who are policy experts. How can municipalities overcome or work around some state level policies that might be handicapping local control and preventing innovative solutions like modern building codes?
So I'll just touch on your first question about utilizing, I think, local for, and so, you know, Beaver Dam, the size community we are, just mentioned that, you know, we have our first company that has come in. I think that's a great conversation that I had written down some notes as we were going through this and saying, you know, we've been having these conversations about this solar field, but we haven't brought them into the conversation. So I'm not sure if they have the capability to do that because they focus more on residential. But that's out of this conversation. That's a question I have and we'll be approaching them on and talking to them about. But certainly having a good relationship with our energy company, with Alliant, has been very, very beneficial. And I think they're interested in working towards this as well. At least they have shared with me as well that they have, you know, that they're moving more toward sustainable energy practices.
I would just add from a Dairyland Power standpoint, it was a real plus when we selected a developer for our large tranche of distributed generation projects. It was a real plus that the developer was using as a general contractor Faith Technologies, whom I'm sure many of you are familiar with. They have locations all around the state and the region. And so we were delighted to utilize that company that was very regional and in some cases local to the projects.
Yeah, Heather, on the building question, state codes and things like that, I think that's still a mountain to climb, you know, based off of the current control. But I think our tact is, you know, I had mentioned this guide. We want to educate our marketplace, not only, you know, the vendors, but our public in terms of, you know, the technologies that are out there, and hopefully we're already seeing, you know, more electric homes, you know, developers, builders, they also believe in this as well. And the culture of our community is starting to slowly turn, but, you know, you're seeing it integrated into buildings. And so if we can show that we're doing it without the codes changing, and then potentially, you know, collectively as communities come together and say, you know, state legislature, you know, allow some of these communities that are already doing it, maybe to have stretch codes or voluntary codes and kind of phase in things. You know, we're not California, can't just go there. So I think that's been our tact, is to methodically go about it, educate, inspire people, you know, equip them with resources for our marketplace in Wisconsin, and then, you know, use that as evidence, you know, have more of our policymakers at the state understand it better.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's true that local governments really are leading the way here. And I want to thank all the panelists. There are so many great questions in the chat. This will inspire future conversations for us, and we will make sure to take note of all your questions and see how we can find answers for you, but we don't have time to get into everything else today. I'd like to thank my co-hosts, Scott Coonan from the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum and Curt Witynski from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. Thanks for being here. Thank you to the mayors, especially, for being here. Thanks, Craig from Dairyland Power, and thank you, Ned from the city of Eau Claire. I'd like to also thank the staff at Renew Wisconsin for putting together this great event. We will have this available at renewwisconsin.org later, and if possible, we'll get it on our partners' websites as well. So thank you so much. I hope you had a wonderful time at this webinar, and we look forward to working with you more on clean energy in the future. Have a great day.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.